So we're just going to be doing some UV mapping in this one, and we're going to model as we go, so that way the whole process takes place here, basically. But it needs to happen that way because the model itself actually determines a lot with what you're going to end up doing with your UVs as well. Now, when you're doing high to low poly bakes, it's easy to get overwhelmed by this, but your blockout mesh a lot of times can be turned into a high poly later on. And so you're dealing with these sharp edges a lot of times, right? Now, if we were to, let's say we do a bevel real quick, so we got a better understanding of this. We do a bevel, and I'm going to use like 8 segments on this one. Okay. And we'll shade it auto smooth real quick. So auto smooth is automatically going through and smoothing by angle is what it's doing, right? So if we apply this modifier real quick, and go back into edit mode, it's all sharps, right? So if you literally shade your object smooth and mark sharps everywhere, Control E, mark sharps, it's the same as you're manually auto smoothing, right? Like you're creating smoothing groups more or less. So, you know, you don't always have to have sharps everywhere on your models. It's something that you can, you know, you can leave some things soft perhaps, but you can end up with like gradients and normal maps when you're doing high to low poly bakes. Sometimes that's not always desirable. And in our case here, we'll just keep it like this for now. Now, I think we all know how to unwrap this, right? Like it's pretty easy to understand that, you know, we're going to place the seams where we need them. But when we're having sharp edges have to be seams. They have to be split up in the UV island, right? So what we can do is we can actually grab an edge, Shift G, select by sharpness, Control E, and just mark the seam now. Boom. And so when we go to the UV editor and we grab here, press A, U, unwrap, we can choose angle-based, conformal, or minimal stretch. Conformal is better for hard surface stuff. We get something like this going on. It splits apart as you'd anticipate it to, right? So it doesn't matter how complex this model starts to get, really. As long as we're still keeping that kind of thing in mind, we can just keep unwrapping appropriately. Now, in this case here, I want to talk about bevels. So really bevels, the secret to bevels anyways, the trick to it is like if we had a cylinder, and I'm going to symmetrize it with Mesh Machine real quick and then just grab these faces here and delete them. We have a quarter of a bevel, or excuse me, a quarter of a cylinder. It's like a bevel basically. All right, so whenever you have a square shape and you're doing a bevel or hard edge anyways, we're looking for those segment counts, usually 2, 4, 8, 16, so on and so forth. Powers of 2. Now, you don't have to use those, but it's important to recognize why this one works in particularly well, is because not only do your cylinders generally work like that if you're using specific cylinders, like so you're doing 8-sided cylinders, 16-sided cylinders, 32-side, 64-side. That works well because you're doing the same topo basically for the quarter of the cylindrical shape as you would with a bevel, doing the same thing. As a result, what we can do is select every other edge, and we can do a reduction later on. So if we want to create LOD models and things like that, super important, right? But if we did this a little bit different, it doesn't work out quite the same way. So like if we did a bevel here and we ended up using like say 6 count, right? And now we got all these edges here. If we try to do every other edge, you see where we can run into an issue? That center one is now selected for the reduction. And when we reduce it, we end up with these 2 left over, so they don't reduce very well either. They turn into a chamfer perhaps, but you can use these. It's nothing that says you're not going to use them at some point. On certain models, you definitely want to think about it or consider using them. But it can get a little bit different, basically. It's a little bit different way of doing things. And so where would you place a seam on this one? Now, generally, when they're even, you would place it in the center, so you can do like your reductions and you don't hit that seam, right? You can reduce again and you don't hit the seam. That's great. One like this, on the other hand, there's nothing that says we can't, you know, we still have a center one here, right? We could place that there, but we can't reduce every other one. We might reduce 2 at a time. We end up kind of where we were on that one, maybe. That might be a possibility. But we can also do other things. Like sometimes you could place seams on the sides. So it's either the center or the sides, generally speaking, is usually where you're going to end up placing these things. I try to go for the center, generally speaking, but occasionally I do have to do this. So just keep that in mind. But if you place it over on the sides here and you select every other one, you see where we're going? You're not going to reduce the sides generally. That's not not usually the goal anyways. So you can do that. You can also like kind of create LODs in interesting ways where you modify the geometry slightly, perhaps. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do. But so when you're looking at your objects, you know, you're thinking of cylinders and bevels in that way in particular. It's not really a big deal. So when we come down here now, and you know, we've done this Boolean here, this Boolean shape, you can see right now, it's a good setup. This bevel on it is 4, right? So if we were to take the main shape now, convert it to a mesh, convert it to mesh, there you go. Of course, hard ops is going to add these bevel weights or whatever to it, but because it does that with a bevel weight. I'm just going to press Q and unmark those. Okay, but that can all be smooth in there too. Once again, sharp edges, right? Mark seams, boom. That can stay together. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. There are going to be times when you're working on something, for example, this big edge over here, or this big set of faces, like it might be too large, right? Like it's just taking up too much. It's going, it's probably a poor example of it, but it might end up being islands that just get really long and they want to be like this. And so when you unwrap, everything ends up like this or something. You can't use that sometimes. So even though you might have a good smooth group, if you would, you might end up just marking a seam on it and doing that number, right? On that center edge or maybe a top one or whatever. So next time you unwrap it, yeah, it'll split apart basically. And so, you know, there are kind of like maintenance reasons, I guess, why you would use seams as well to kind of split things up. If this is a very noticeable edge or noticeable area of this model, like whatever you're presenting to the player as they're in the game, hey, that's probably the edge you don't want to have a seam on, right? Like, not that you can't do this, there's going to be times you have to, but you know, you might want to find a more of a glancing angle or shift things around in ways that you think work out better for that seam anyways. So a lot of times you're placing them in like cracks and crevices and corners and things like that. You're not necessarily always on the edge itself, but if you have to, you have to. That's one of those things. The more complicated your model gets, obviously the more you're going to have to do things that you don't really want to do with the seams perhaps, but it's required. So, and that's just the trick to 3D modeling in general. Like, there's not always a perfect bake. There's not always a perfect shading. There's not always, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can get really good at it. You can make a lot of things really great, but at a point sooner or later, it's not going to, you know, you're going to have discrepancies here or there. It's certainly going to happen. All right, so in setting, holding control, like for a chamfer, for example, like if we know we want to make a chamfer, obviously, machine tools, you can just hit 2, and then you can mark seams, mark sharps if needed. We'll do a Boolean union using bool tools, Control-Shift-B. You can just do auto Booleans unions. That's going to be a destructive Boolean. And attach those two pieces together, hopefully. I think I had them intersecting. If they weren't quite intersecting, there'll be a little issue. But so yeah, you can see where that's going. If we shade smooth, oh, we need a sharp back here too. And it means a seam. So on and so forth. And this is what Q does more or less with mark with hard ops. It does a seam. Well, it does bevel weight, crease, and sharps all automatically. But you can set it to do seams as well if you wanted to. So that's something available to you. You want to think about your triangulation at the end of the day, how it's going to work out. So if I just hit Control T and look at it real quick, you see, like this would probably be better to there in general. That's the main thing there. But yeah, you can keep working on your objects for a while. Get box cutter on, keep hitting the wrong key or double tapping it. So here's the thing about this, right? Like, we can do this kind of stuff all day long. We'll have to clean booleans up potentially. I kind of messed that up. Let's do that again. A lot of times if you do simpler booleans, you're going to have a much better time. But if you need a bevel, you need a bevel. And so you hit B with box cutter and Q. You do that. And I'm going to hit B again and mouse wheel up once so we get this. So your geometry does need to line up with each other very well, because you're going to have shading issues if it doesn't, unfortunately. More than likely anyways. So you got to think about your booleans and your edges and how they all go back together, basically. In our case here, we're just going to wing it and go for whatever's happening in here. We'll just kind of let it be. Leave an end on or whatever if we need to. You can see, it's again, the bevel, adding those guys. Now, there's going to be times you're fighting with tools a little bit, trying to unmark things, turn off auto smooth, because box cutter, I think, turns it back on by default. I don't really care for it, but maybe there's a setting for that. One of the good things about the whole auto smooth fiasco that happened a while ago is that just regular smoothing will now use you can use sharps with it, and you can use weighted normals and things. The only downside of that is sometimes you want sharps and you don't want to see the sharps take an effect on the mesh, and so you have to use auto smooth to work with it that way, which is kind of backwards the way it used to work. It's interesting. But nonetheless, yeah, like you can see, we can come in here, we can start trying to fix things up, merge them, whatever we got to do. This is pretty messy in here. And so, which one should we merge to? Maybe that one? That's going to cause a little bit of a problem on this side, I think, right here. Might get away with being able to flatten it to the right. Ooh, maybe not. Is that going all the way up? Yeah, it's a little goofy in there, huh? Anyways, yeah, it happens, you know, when you're working on things. Probably have to sharpen them. Add seams, all that other fun stuff, right? So we'll do that. We'll mark the sharps and we'll mark the seams. Should be a little bit easier to get a hold of this edge, but we'll be all right. You can see how that works out. Not too bad. Are we going to have a good bake with something like this? Probably not. And there's a reason for this, because the topology is not great topology. Also, I shift things like this quite heavily. It's not maybe the best, most correct answer, but I do that sometimes. But the main reason we'll have maybe an issue on this one is if we are creating an automatic cage in Substance Painter or Marmoset or something like that, it's usually like hitting Alt S and then doing this number, scaling out or shrink or flatten or whatever. And in that area where it's really crazy, that might go the wrong way. It might not work out exactly how you anticipate it to. And so that is a real possibility. And this is why clean geo and really thinking about what you're doing can be super useful when making your low polys. It may not be working out the way you anticipate it or expect it to. So we'd want to fix this area somehow, probably doing another Boolean, lining it up better. Things like that could happen. So I think this extra edge here on this backside is not quite what we need. But nonetheless, yeah. So you can see, you know, just being able to like go through mark sharps and then doing your UVs later is probably the better method. So you can just hit Control E and mark seams and then add the additional seams that you need, or remove seams sometimes that you might have that you don't need. In our case, you know, if it's sharp edges, it needs seams. So it's not like a real good example here, but anyways, you got the idea. Also, this can cause issues with unwraps in general when you're trying to work with them. So if you unwrap, conformal is better for hard surface, angle is better for organics. But yeah, it can cause issues with the unwrap sometimes. If you're not sure, here, like what a piece is, like this one, you can turn on UV sync, select a piece of it, right? And tilde key view select, you can find it. Well, of course, that's the interior there. So we already found it, but it's still definitely unwrapping terribly, which I wouldn't anticipate that to happen on that one necessarily. But once again, it's where's it's falling apart is that little area that's, well, all messed up, right? It's not really anywhere else doing that. So we actually have to fix this then, by the looks of it. Or add a seam or something. I didn't do something in here. There's some issue. Okay, yeah, you see, we got the bottom down there still. I didn't realize that. So this one down here, this bevel, we can mark a seam here. And we can mark a seam here. unwrap. Boom. There you go. Something like that anyways. There are going to be occasional times where you still have to manually unwrap things where it just doesn't really work out all that well. Like you'll have to stitch things together and whatnot. I don't think I got a good stitch example on here right now. But the main idea, what stitching is, let's say, we'll turn UV sync off. Turn that off. Select it all. Select by island. So like, let's say we want to stitch these two together, which I think we can. Oh, it's going to stitch. Okay, I see what's going to happen. We're going to do this here. Alt V. Hit I. Okay. Normally it's going to the other spot over there. Alt V and I. So you can see it's going to try to go over there. Now it's going to come over here. When we do that, sometimes it displays wrong as well. It's a little bit weird. Like you think it's going to cause an error, but it doesn't necessarily do that. So stitching is actually kind of important. We could do the other edge and you'll see we'll flip it around. Now, because we have sharp edges, we wouldn't want them connected like this, but there are going to be times you want to stitch things back together. So Alt V is stitching it and I to invert it if needed. That's the main thing I want to drive home with that one. And you can do things like that, perhaps, no problem. Now, if your objects are different sizes and you try to stitch, you get it into this weird situation. Just grab your islands, right? And then average island scales. Boom. You need to control these island scales sometimes. It's important. So you can do something like that perhaps, right? And also, your objects that you're creating, you're worried about textile density and things like that a lot of times. Look, the interior section here, if I just press L, select by face and press L, select by seams or UVs perhaps. Now here's the thing. We got the inside section. I'm going to pull it out. All right. And this does not necessarily need to have as much texture to it as the other parts. You can reduce the textile density and maybe scale this one a little bit smaller because you're not really going to see in here all that well. You still want texture perhaps, but it's not as important as say like this big outer section, right? So you can do things like that and just kind of be a little bit methodical about it. It's quite useful to understand that. This piece here, you can see it kind of is in a weird way. I believe this one, is it not? No, this one. Ah, okay. So this one needs to be split, right? And if we're following that idea of using a center, we'll use the center. Otherwise, you use the outer. And it should work out. Okay. So now when we unwrap that, it'll be split down even more. All right. And more seams, this adds up. It counts as kind of like a new vertex in the data. So it does build up a bigger file size. So you want to be kind of only use it when you need it, right? Like don't split them unless you absolutely need it. Without the sharp edges at least, right? So try to keep things as big chunks or islands as much as possible. It's useful. Unless there's sharp edges, right? So yeah, we can do this all day long. We can go through and you can see like we don't really need that one because this wasn't too big overall. And this big edge out here is now no longer a seam apparently, so we'll remark it. You see, so we can keep doing this all day long where we're working on a model and getting used to this idea of creating them in this manner and working them out basically. So like we can double check things and we can manually pack these together. And I highly recommend learning to do it manually first before you start always going up here and just click and pack islands, because this is not usually very efficient. It does an okay job and sometimes it is very efficient, but it's hit or miss. And so if you learn to pack things manually, it's so much better to understand and then work with the packers later on. There's certain times you don't want to have everything necessarily packed together in that manner because it rotates things usually. You can tell it not to, but yeah, there's certain situations you don't want it to. So pack everything. Now, this one here, let's say most of these are up and down, left and right, and that's what you want. If you had something come in like this, right, and it's rotated, this edge is going to be aliased. So your textures will have like a, there'll be like a noise on your edges when you're doing high to low poly bakes. You don't generally want that, but it's not always avoidable. So what you want to do is you want to straighten things on like their longest edges usually. In this case, if we just grab the edge using the text tools add-on, highly recommend using this add-on. Align edge, a lot of times you can straighten the whole island out based off of one edge. So that's a super useful tool or technique there anyways. A trick to get things going the right way. Let's talk about cylinders real quick. Very easy to get overwhelmed with cylinders, I think, as a beginner, especially when the shapes become more complex. But the thing is that even the simple ones will give you some trouble if you're not used to working with them, perhaps. So we're going to play around with this idea of a cylinder. It's just like what we were just doing. But the main thing here is like if we shade this auto smooth real quick, I'm just going to right click and convert it to a mesh to apply the auto smooth. All right, we can see what's going on here. We get all these sharp edges, which is great. And the sharp edges, of course, you select coplanar, or excuse me, coplanar. Select by sharpness and then Control E, mark seams. Right now, you can see what's going on here, right? Great. When we unwrap this, we get a bunch of circles. This is where you're probably going to get messed up quite a bit, is dealing with cylinders and curved shapes can be quite frustrating. But we get a bunch of circles. That's not what you want, generally speaking. You can do that, but you're going to have aliasing on all of these edges potentially. And there's some pros and some cons for what we're about to do as well. This one is okay to be a circle, okay, like the middle one. You can't do nothing with that one, so that's fine. But as for these other ones, we need to break them up. And this is where it gets tricky. So we're just going to do this one real quick by alt-clicking here all the way through to the bottom, mark a seam. Okay, so there's no sharp, but we still got to mark a seam. When we unwrap this, we get something like this. These are not what you want. You're going to have to straighten these out. Without add-ons, it's difficult or it's not very fun to do. With add-ons like text tools, way easier. You just click rectify. Okay, there's other add-ons that do similar things, but that's going to straighten them out like this. Now, there's kind of a con to this. I'm going to show you here in just a sec. We're going to throw checker texture on real quick with text tools. So just click checker map there. You can delete it when you don't want it. Right, so we'll see if it shows up at all in some of this. Maybe it doesn't. Usually it does. Let's get a higher resolution checker map. Let me delete that one. I'm going to create one real quick. Go to new, material, create image texture, set it to, well, click new, color grid, and we're going to do click drag down, type in 2048. Everything needs to be a power of 2 when you're creating game textures. It doesn't have to be a square, but it has to be a power of 2. So it can be 2048 by 2048 or 1024 by 2048, something like that. A little harder to deal with the non-square ones anyways when you're unwrapping and stuff. But you see what's going on here? They're bent, like they're kind of warped. This is a known thing. It happens in all the 3D software for the most part. The only way to get around this issue is to add more geometry. And it doesn't get rid of it entirely. It just makes it smaller. Okay. This is just the way the triangulation works. And to prove this point, I'm just going to triangulate everything on that bigger one, actually. Okay. And you can see here, if I take these triangles and use the machine tools, I'm just going to hit 2 to rotate them. But you can right click and rotate if you want as well. There's a little option in there for it. This happens. Okay. So this is extremely important to understand, that when your mesh is being baked, right? It's like combining the high poly and the low poly model together. But this triangulation matters a lot. And when you're going to go to like Unreal Engine, let's say you baked in Substance, you textured everything up, you took your model and, you know, made it look really nice. Maybe you even triangulated it to go to Substance or whatever. But if you go into Unreal Engine with basically the same model but different triangulation, it'll look like it was baked wrong. So whatever you're sending out to Substance sometimes, your LOD 0, more than likely, needs to maybe be put into Unreal Engine as well. And then that, even if that means using a little bit of a denser mesh and then working it out in LOD levels, right? So like LOD 0 be the closest, and then LOD 1 a little further away, LOD 2. And start to drop off all the extra detail. So if you need those edges, you know, You can see I'm just rotating back and forth, apparently. I wonder if we can actually undo it all. There you go. All right. If you need those edges for your LOD 0, use them. And then LOD them out, right? That's the thing about that. Okay, so that's the drawback, but now you know about it. Okay, very important to understand that one. So you will want to do a triangulate modifier. Usually, very last thing, keep normals. You can shade auto smooth, unpin it. It goes before that. And then you might do like weighted normals. So you add a weighted normal modifier. And that'll go before even the triangulate. Keep sharps, use face influence, all that fun stuff. This is how you're going to set it up to bake, basically. So you're going to send something like that to Substance Painter. Now, as much fun as all that was, usually your objects are not this simple. So, I mean, a lot of them can be, but a lot of them aren't going to be. So let's just get through this and turn those off real quick and get this view gone. There you go. And we'll dissolve these for now. We could actually leave those. Let's just leave them for a sec. So let's say we're going to do some kind of cut in this thing. First, you need to make sure your geo is going to match well enough that it'll create a good bake. And deform correctly and all that other fun stuff, right? So you see how much this is tied together? Most people don't realize how tied together your low poly, your UVs, and baking can actually be sometimes. It's very tied together. The high poly is the easy part. Because for the most part, it's you're not doing much with it. You're just creating a really good looking model. And try not to have any like holes in it for where the low is going to look like baked down, where it bakes down to the lows, no holes in your high poly, so there's no ray misses. That's the big one there. But yeah, like if we're doing a bevel here, like something real dense like this, we're going to have all these extra vertices. Not a good idea. We would rather have these match up closer to each other, and then we could work this out to be more proper, maybe. Something like that. But if you do have like some really crazy shape, you know, your cylinder, you know, you got to support this stuff. You got to model it correctly, guys. There's no cheat in the system sometimes. But the main idea I wanted to go through here with this one is we're just going to knock in a Boolean. Get rid of it now. And so I can go back through here and maybe start working this out, sharpening it and doing all that other fun stuff, right? So, you know, if you ever feel like you want to do, you can just use cursor selector with C, mouse wheel up and down, left click, middle click to deselect, right click to get out of it. You can do a selection like this and then select loops, boundary loops, or press 2 with machine tools. You can definitely go do this, mark sharps, mark seams, all the way across that one. Okay. Mark seams, and you can see like it's its own island right now. So if we were to have this all shaded, shaded smooth real quick, we might have some stuff we need to clean up. I think we can bring both of those down to that one. We'll be okay. Sometimes I deform my mesh ever so slightly, but it's okay usually. It's not too bad. If it's not too crazy anyways, you can get away with it. Sometimes having an ingon, also not the end of the world. A couple ingons in here probably won't hurt this whole shape overall, especially with like weighted faces and things like that, but weighted normals, weighted face weights. Anyways, you can do like little weird things with that as well, which I think we applied. So that's why we're having shading issues maybe. Geometry data. Nope, it didn't apply. Okay. Let's do weighted. Keep sharps and use face influence. Even this helps sometimes on your sharp edge object. So sometimes you want like certain ones to take a little bit more priority over the others. So you'll do face influence and Alt-N. You can bring up this menu, set face strengths. It's usually medium by default, but it's not flagged or tagged. So, but that's usually the where it's at. So strong is the one we want, right? And we might want to do that because we can get different kind of results in these corners, perhaps, if we do that. See, like the strong up here didn't work out so well, so maybe we set it back to medium, and maybe that works out better. But strong down on the bottom might be pretty good, who knows? And so we can kind of fluctuate those around a little bit to get a better result ultimately, even if we have like the poles and things and the ingons. Sometimes it's just, it works out better anyways. Cool, right? So now we got through all that and we have this set up. It's a mess, but we'll just unwrap conformal real quick. Grab islands. This is the whole reason I did this right here. Because if this is not quads, you cannot rectify it. Okay? Like, and sometimes you got to go back into object mode, select your object, go back into edit mode, then select your island, and then try to rectify it. This is what happens when you try to rectify this one. Okay? So like it starts to fall apart basically. And it doesn't work out quite the way you would anticipate it to. Which is a problem because we want it straight up and down and left and right. With text tools, this is kind of easy to deal with. There's two options here, really, that we could try to approach this. We could rectify it and start trying to stitch all this back together, perhaps. I mean, that's a possibility. But we could grab one edge here, alt-clicking on it. We can maybe do something like straighten. And you can see it does this number. The only problem with this one is that these aren't perfectly lined up with each other. Okay? And so we would have to go through and adjust our UV and kind of, you could try doing something like right-clicking and doing straighten on Y. Not straighten, align vertically or align horizontally. So maybe horizontally, you see? We can do something like that. If you have the machine tools add-on, Alt-A, you can align bottom. It's very easy to do. We have a lot of these to do, so you're going to be a little bit busy if you try to do it that way, right? I'm going to show you a little trick to this one. All right. And I'm going to Alt-A and align left. And now I'm going to Alt-A and align right. Make sure those are all straight up and down. These ones should also be straight up and down for the most part. Just want to keep it all kind of in order, basically. I'm going to skip these ones because I don't want to shift them around right now. Okay, and I can either go left or right with them. It's really up to me. Now, here's the thing. All of these edges here, see, we can kind of like alt-click on these, or alt-shift-click. If I can grab in the middle, it would be better. So a lot of these we can do that. I don't know if I'd touch that one just yet, okay? There's a reason for that. Maybe these ones are okay, okay? Maybe that one too. When you're pushing vertices around on an n-gon shape, you can really screw up the UVs on it bad, to where that little triangulation issue I showed you earlier can really start to cause problems. So you have to be very careful with modifying those shapes and trying to get them just perfect if you're going to try to modify them. What we're just doing is we're just going through and selecting them so we can switch to individual origins. And now we can hit SY0. It flattens all of them out, basically, okay? That's just one way you can do that. Now, set it back to medium point. It's just kind of something you might have to go through. Otherwise, you can just alt-click and alt-A them all or whatever. It's fun. Yeah, so you see where we're heading with this. We can use a checker map, switch through the different ones if you want. We can see what's going on here, at least, with this, this full deal. I'm going to make it larger for a second just so we can see more tiles. Okay. And so right here is where things might get a little interesting. Like this one is not aligned right. Like it's not up and down, left and right. It's hard to tell that on these circles. So this is where the checker maps really help. We can do that. So in our case, with text tools add-on, we can align world. Okay. That's going to save you a lot of trouble there as well. You can press L, select by seams, all that fun stuff. And if you need to, align world. Okay. Really useful, by the way, that one. And we can go back through here, rectify, all that fun stuff, right? And this one, it should have broke. It broke somewhere else. What is this doing? These are the little ones on the inside, maybe? Or what's going on here? Sometimes, yeah, if you don't know where something exists, I just saw it move. Which one was that? That's these ones over here. Okay, yeah, so they're splitting right there. You could split it over here still. It's not like the end of the world. But you might want to split it at the front too. I mean, that's a possibility. You can come through here and split it all. Like it, well, here's the thing. Let's say this is like a piece in an environment and there's a little control panel and steps going in there. And it's like some kind of sci-fi experiment. All right. Your player's most likely going to walk up to this thing and see it from this angle. Your best spot for the seam would probably be in the back, doing something like that. So you can see it, you know, you can fiddle with UVs for a minute, try to get everything just right and perfect. It can happen. So like now I got to unwrap it again and go back and maybe straighten things, align things, rectify them. I got to fix this whole area again, apparently, the way that worked out. So I'm just going to straighten it for now. I really don't want to do that one again. So a lot of times, yeah, I think I do have to kind of do that one again. I don't like that idea, but yeah, I'd have to redo that one. Or I'd do some like crazy stitch job, which probably would even take longer. So it's better to just redo it. And we won't mess with that one. We'll just get all these going again. Is that broken? Yeah, okay. Sometimes you can't tell if they're broken, so, you know, try rectifying it. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. All right, and there we go. So that's great. We got it going. Now, if we pack them, I'm going to set a little bit of margin here and just click pack. But rotation method, a lot of times you want to use cardinal, so it goes left and down, up and right, and not at 45 degrees and weird stuff like that. So you can see it went ahead and packed it. It's okay. Like it's not going to get any much better than this because it's a cylindrical shape the way it is. Oftentimes they end up kind of being this way where you have these long edges, perhaps on the left of the, well, long edges in the UVs anyways. And so a lot of times this is why you see guys split things in half and they overlap UVs. Cylindrical shapes are pretty decent for that because you can actually flip your UVs if everything's symmetrical, and you can make it look completely seamless without a butterfly effect, which is really great. If you've never noticed that when you're using a something like a mirror modifier, there's this little option to flip U's and flip V's, you see? So you can make kind of crazy things like that happen. If I was to apply that, actually, let's just send it out here, convert it to a mesh. But yeah, as you see, if I apply that, it's just kind of like splitting everything. It's rather interesting, huh? Anyways, one of those things you play with it, you'll get used to it, but we're not even trying to do that right now, so. All right, now, that's unwrapped, correct, for the most part. This spacing, it's kind of interesting how the spacing works out. And you get used to it after a little while, but you're going to hear recommendations of like if it's a 1024 texture map, right, to use 8 pixel spacing. If it's a 2K 2048, right, use 16 pixels for the separation between your islands and the border itself. Then they'll say 4K, they'll be like 32 pixels, and everybody freaks out over this. Here's a little trick because it's powers of 2, and if you're using something like Packmaster, when you check this out over here, there's a pixel margin option, which you won't have in Vanilla Blender, but it's set to 1024 by default. But if we just set it to 8, if this was going to be a 4K texture, if we set 8 here and we end up using a 4K texture, it'll still have like a 32 pixel spread. So you don't really change anything at all. If you don't have, like, if you want to change it to a different size, then maybe, but it doesn't really matter that much. Not as much as people probably think it does. So like I can just go ahead and pack this. I can turn on heuristics, advanced heuristics. So yeah, this is a great add-on. Once you start packing lots of really dense stuff, it's really useful. But notice that this one here, it's only like 25% efficiency, okay, for the UV space utilization with that packer. The regular packer, when we do that, it's basically the same thing. So like when we look at our textile density here with textile density add-on, less than 25%. That's terrible. It's a horrible pack. The only way you can get this one up, there's 2 ideas here, or maybe 3. You start overlapping your UVs, reusing like the left side on the right side. That'll increase, or it'll make these, basically these islands will become cut in half. And so you'll be able to pack these in more like this, right? Where we're not worried about half of them. Makes more sense, right? So that's a possibility. You could do something like that. Otherwise, you're going to always be limited by the size of that island. So you don't necessarily have to delete it and overlap it. You could just also split them up, right? Like we can continue splitting them up. But if we split here, it's very apparent to the players. Maybe that's not a great thing. So we, you know, maybe we come over here and we split here, and maybe we don't want to split it on all of it. Maybe just like the outer section, because it's the biggest sections. The insides weren't too large, right? So maybe we do that, and then maybe we would just want to maybe we want to have the same one over there, perhaps, right? So I'm trying to get a mirror selection going, but that's not working out, is it? All right, so we'll do this edge. Okay, so if we re-unwrap now, it's going to do the same number, but you see how much smaller they are? Okay, so yeah, it's a maintenance reason, basically, is what we're doing there. This piece now, we can just go back, straighten it. We won't overthink that one for now, and can rectify. You can do things in small pieces, chunks, but a lot of times you'll lose the scale of the islands. You can just average the island scales later, perhaps. You got to learn to work with like things a little bit individually sometimes. But yeah, you see how much better that is now? So this one can be rectified too. Boom. Now if I was to use Pack Master, come over here. I'm going to turn usually pre-rotation disabled off so that it doesn't rotate kind of strangely. Okay, a little bit better maybe. I still wouldn't say it's very good. It's better, but it's at 60. Only 50. Still not very good. So this is a really thin object. It's not very tall. The other option here is not to pack as if it was a square texture map and end up using a non-square texture map. So like a 2048 by 1024. So it's like a 2:1 aspect ratio. And if that's the case, we can do that in here. There's a way to do it now with the advanced options, I think, where you can say like, don't use these areas of this texture or this UV space. Non-square packing. No, not that one. Okay, there's a target box, you see? This is an interesting one. So if you're going to do a 2:1 aspect ratio, you can just set this up like this. You don't have to use the non-square packing one. You can just do it like this. Just make sure that you're at these grid lines here at least. Okay. And you should be able to pull that apart. Oh, and just make sure it's good. You can see we got options for it to set numbers if we need to. Make sure it's perfect anyways. So then you can just, yeah, you can just pack this now. You see? Now was our efficiency? Oh, it's going to give us the wrong efficiency because it's still counting all the outside area here, but we can clearly see that this is more efficient. It's much more efficient. So if we were using a non-square texture, this is fine, right? However, even though you could use a non-square texture, this is why 3D modeling gets so complicated for a lot of guys, because we could just use half of a texture map and then make another cylindrical object and force it down here. See where I'm going? Or maybe do some props or other details for this thing. So we can finish filling out this UV space. So there's all kinds of different ways of, thinking about controlling your UVs, where you're going to do it, et cetera, right? All right. So that's it. I mean, really, if you start playing around with these ideas with UV mapping, like model something, unwrap it. Try to make sure the textures or the map turns out straight the way you need it, right? Like it's turning out straighter. And you're using things, you're spinning them around to make sure they're aligned properly and all the other fun stuff that you got to do. That's great. That's what you want to do. You want to be checking these things, making very professional UVs. You want to work them out. I always forget that it's up here. I always think it's down there for some reason. But yeah, and then before you know it, you should be pretty much golden. See, this one, I got it right at that edge, barely. That's nice, actually. It's not too bad. I'm going to bring it up just a tiny bit. You want to have that same bleed room around the borders so that way your islands have bleed for your textures, because you got what's called MIP maps. Textures have like LOD levels for them. So MIP maps are LODs for textures, basically. And so your 2048 texture, after you're so far away from it, becomes 1024, basically, or a 512 or 256, or they reduce in size. And so as they reduce in size, they become blurrier. but or they become more aliased or blurry or whatever the heck happens with them. The filtering happens on it, and that what ends up happening is you don't have any bleed room. You might have like black start bleeding into your texture. So that's the whole reason of doing diffusion or whatever, where it sends extra color information off to the side of the islands, which is why you see so many texture maps look kind of confusing, like the base color when it's the high to low bake. That's why it's happening. So, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, guys, that's kind of the whole setup there. I think the more you play around with these ideas, the better you get at it. And the main thing is like if you can avoid anything facing the viewers, great. If you can put them in cracks and crevices, great. If you don't always have to use sharps, don't always use sharps. You can certainly use bevels and things like that as well. Now, the high to low baking, right? Everybody's probably wondering, like, if you UV map in this manner, okay, your high to low bake should work out fairly well, as long as your low poly matches the high poly relatively well, okay? You shouldn't have too many major errors, but you have to practice doing this right here. The texture itself, it should appear relatively like straight, like flat. The checker map should be relatively good. You shouldn't have any major issues with them. And also, keep in mind that, like when you have scales, like for example, this bottom section here, you can scale individual islands sometimes at different sizes. So they don't have to have the same texture density on it. So you can use more space for more important areas, perhaps. Okay. This is still terrible unwrap. But anyways, the thing is that you could do, you know, like, is anybody going to really see this center section in here all that well? Then reduce it. I know a lot of people like to keep everything like perfectly squared up, but that's probably not what you should be doing. If you ever have to match island scales, I just want to mention this real quick. Let me grab a hold of, let's say, these two. You have different island scales, right? You can use the checker map to figure this out. You could say like, oh, this one's too big, so I'm just going to make this about the same size. You can shift it around a little. You can line up the edges. That's why checker maps, well, that's how a lot of people did texel density with checker maps for a long time until they got dedicated tools for it, I think. But anyways, that's something you can do. On the flip side of that, you can also do, you know, you select both of these and average island scales. All right, that's another way of doing it. Very easy. But they're going to be a different size than whatever else you've, like you saw what happened there, right? So like this one's larger, they're going to average out to each other. Now they're too big for this section, so we'd have to reduce both of them, all right, to match those. So the checker map still makes sense. Now, also, if you don't have a checker map for whatever reason, you can go to this drop down here. You got a mouse wheel over to it. You can change it to, by default, it says angle. Turn it on real quick. It's going to say angle by default, but we want to display area, okay? When things are different sizes, they get different colors, like texel densities. So like if you can match them closer to like blue, now that's going to match the rest of the model better. And if I do that one, closer to blue, like that dark blue, there you go. That should be pretty close, okay? So you can always do things in that manner as well for matching those. You can see how much more room we have now to play with, right? Could probably just come back in here and pack it again if that's still there. I don't know if it is. It doesn't display it right now. Oh, there it goes. Yeah. So did it average my island scales back out? I think it did. No, it doesn't look like it changed, does it? It's hard to tell sometimes. I think it might have. Where's the scale option? There's an option for it somewhere where so you can normalize scale. Anyways. No, I don't think it is. I think it's just what it is. All right, cool. I really thought about it before. Anyways, here's a good test. Just look at the bottom. Is it larger checkers or no? You know, let's say we do a lot bigger. Yeah, now you can, well, we have the colors over here anyways. I should have just been looking at that. All right, they didn't change them, did they? All right, so yeah, guys, practice modeling and doing this. It's really that simple. Like, make models, try to make them cleanly, as clean as you can. Try to unwrap them. Remember, also, you have what's called correct face attributes, which I've done a video kind of talking about before, but just real quick, like, there's certain operations that you can, trying to find the right one. There's certain things you can do in Blender where you don't destroy UVs, right? So, like GG twice doesn't influence this a whole lot, okay? The triangulation there does influence it, obviously, but like an inset sometimes is okay. It doesn't do a whole lot, okay? Whereas like if you extrude and scale, it's terrible. Okay, you can't do that. Loop cuts, fine. GG twice, fine, okay? Now, with correct face attributes on, you can do other things you normally wouldn't do. Like if we were to say like move, for example, this is probably a terrible model to do this on, but if I start moving, it distorts our UV, okay? If I turn that on and try turning keep connected on as well, unless it causes an error, then maybe try it with it off, but keep connected on, I can move now and it doesn't mess it up as bad, okay? It still can get messed up, so you want to be careful with your movements, but if you ever need to do like reductions of things and you're no longer able to do like symmetrize and stuff like that, use vertex snapping, turn that option on. And what you can do, like dissolves won't really influence this a whole lot. Like obviously it's going to shift it around a bit, but the vertex itself, you can move around, you can snap. So you just hold control, snap it around with the correct face attributes on. We can do something almost like target welding, basically. If we actually turn auto merge on, it would work just like target weld from like Max or Maya or whatever. And so we can move things around in that manner. And we can just snap them out. So we can do reductions later for LOD models, doing more intensive edits in this manner, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And you'll probably have to do it on a triangulated mesh too, more than likely, I have a feeling. But anyways, that's the UV mapping video, guys. I think hopefully at least this helps a lot of you guys out, because it's a runaway topic sometimes, because it really depends on the models you're creating sometimes, more so than you know, just the like a theory behind it. Because every time you create a certain type of geometry, you'll run into issues, especially if you're not used to doing it, or you're not real good with topology yet. So like you want to create like some kind of, you know, science projects and cylindrical shapes and all kinds of other stuff. Like the square stuff's rather easy, right? But the everything else can get a little bit more out of control, especially really curvy, organic type stuff. But try to work those together somehow, maybe. Anyways, and you have two objects, so you would have two materials. Well, you don't have to have two materials. You could pack these together, obviously, right? So if I go back to the UV editor here, you still have that option on. Let's just do a pack. See where we're going. You can take two objects into, if I can get a hold of them, you can take two objects into the UV editor. Alt Q between two objects. Shift select both of them. Boom. All right. So this is normally how I would go about doing things, something like this. But there will be times I manually unwrap things and I stitch them and I move vertices around and I use pin verts. So you can pin vertices in place and use relax and stuff like that. That's more for organic stuff, more curvy stuff. Lots of geometry usually. But for the hard surface, kind of squared up, low poly game meshes, this is this will carry you through on any project for the most part, what I've shown you in this video on the hard surface stuff. All right, shouldn't be a big deal, anyways. And if we do textile density here, calculate, you can see UV space efficiency just not calculated. I gotta select it. Only 64%. All right, not very good. I'll put it that way. We could probably work the bottom one better. because this is a big empty spot here. That's a big empty spot. There's a few spots. If you want to just try to pack them together, you could also maybe get away with that. So if you're planning on combining two things, you might as well, right? The nice thing about separating them the way I did originally is that you could always swap a model for a different model and combine their textures later on, perhaps. It's a little bit easier, in my opinion, to like bake those back together or edit them in Photoshop and put them back together. And then just offset your UVs or whatever you got to do. Now we're still using heuristics. We're turning this guy off. I want to see how efficient it can pack, though. I don't suspect this one's going to get that much better because it's pretty awkward as far as the resolutions and everything. And the split up of the islands is just very awkward. If you had more stuff to add to this, like more like little control boxes or things like that, this will fill in quite quickly. We'll start placing things inside of all those holes. So in that case, we would end up with closer to like a 75-ish, 80. And really, 80 is a good goal, okay? 90 is even better, but it's not always possible to reach like stupid high efficiency like that without overlaps. So anyways, I think, yeah, that's it for this video. Hopefully it helps you out. You've learned something about, well, unwrapping and working with models maybe. This really was meant for you guys that were running into baking issues, because it's kind of crazy to say that, right? Like, why would this? Because if you don't control your model and you don't control your UVs, it does create most of your baking issues. I found that to be mostly the case, right? And good UV seams go a long way, right? Not that you always need to add seams everywhere, but if you got to break them up, break them up. It's a bunch of stuff that's bothering me. This is not something normally I'd be happy with because it's too much space. Up and down is fine. Everything's been rectified for the most part. Some things you can't do anything about, like this area. Like you could try to straighten it, but it could probably cause a lot of distortion on the UV. So it's stuff like that, right? So you got to leave some of them alone sometimes. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Tell me what you thought about this one. A little bit lengthier than I was planning on doing, but hopefully you got something out of it. I'll check you out in the next one, all right? Take care.